This happened during the summer of '96. This case differs from the previous ones, because firstly, it happened in a good part of town, in which I lived, by the way. And secondly, because I heard part of this story firsthand, even before my grandpa told me about it. One night, around 1 a.m., a man burst into my grandpa's precinct, raving like a lunatic and holding a crying woman in a torn dress. After managing to calm him down, officers on duty started to listen to his story. He, 32-year-old, small-time businessman, was visited by some friends that evening and asked his wife, 27, housewife, to take their kid, 8-month-old boy, and go for a stroll around the block. What kind of visit and from what kind of friends makes you ask your wife to take your child and leave the house at 11 p.m. is a separate question, and some investigators tried to tie the visit to what happened next, and had certain success with it. After running some checks on those friends, who had pretty evident connections to a big local gang, he clearly paid them protection money, since both he and his business were doing fine, but I'll come back to it later. After around 1 hour and 10 minutes, he finally managed to get rid of his friends, and started to worry about his wife, who hasn't come back yet. When he came out of the house, he couldn't see her anywhere, and started to circle their apartment complex, shouting her name, when suddenly, he literally stumbled upon the overturned stroller, lying there in the dark. Stroller was lying on the asphalt road. You can see on the first photo. There was no lanterns on the road back then, and there are none today. The closest ones are something like 30 meters away, near the walkway, lying along the edge of the forest. So yeah, you can't see shit there at night. When he realized that stroller was empty, he started to seriously panic. But then he heard sobbing coming from the forest, and rushed towards it, where he found his wife, weeping and wandering between the trees, in a nigh unconscious state. Failing to get any sort of response from her, he just put her in his car and drove towards the precinct. My grandpa had nearly as much success. She was answering slowly, couldn't even recall her own name at first. She was clearly in a state of shock, so a doctor was called in immediately. But something my grandfather did learn, by basically asking her the same questions over and over again. To sum up her incoherent speech, this is what happened. She was walking along the very same road when something big rushed towards her from the direction of an apartment complex, pushed her away, grabbed her child from a stroller and ran towards an iron tower, and then into the woods. She followed this something to the forest, but failed to catch up with it. Also yes, this is exactly how she called it. Something. That my grandfather remembered very well. After that, there was a theory about a big animal, but I'll tell you about it later. The doctor, who arrived by then, examined her, finding bruises and small scratches that she probably received while pursuing the abductor throughout the woods. No further damage was found, but she was indeed in a state of shock. Doctor advised to give her some glycine, or glycerol. Fuck if I know. What I have written in my notes there. Don't harass me about it. Let her have some sleep, and advised to avoid stress. He chastised my grandfather for questioning her in such a state. He also advised to hospitalize her if her condition wouldn't improve on the next day. It was decided, without much hope, to conduct a search while the trail was hot, with the help of a cynologist and his dog. The iron tower was found pretty fast, 250 meters away from the spot stroller was found. There was an overhead power line, which you can see on the attached photo. I actually found 2 of such towers there, but the second one is too far away, and there are some more warehouses near instead of a forest, so I bet I got the right one. During the examination of the stroller, something strange started to happen. Dog, long-haired German Shepherd, a huge male. Saw that dog a few times in my childhood, and it was indeed enormous. Started to act erratic, and growling at the house, pressing its tail, ignoring cynologist's commands, who was pretty surprised by that behavior from an adult dog that never acted like that before. He was the one who proposed a theory about a large wild animal that might have caused dog, unfamiliar with hunting, to react that way. On the fabric that covered the stroller, there was a small torn gap no one paid much attention to. After all, it could have torn during its fall on the asphalt, covered in small pebbles. and pieces of broken glass. But my father noted this anyway. Maybe he had some thoughts about it. No traces of blood were found inside the stroller or on the ground around it. They even double-checked it during the day. Nothing. The stroller was taken for an expertise anyways, which gave no results. When they finally reached the tower, despite the dog acting completely inadequate and outright refusing to pick up the trail, they started to ponder what to do next. There was no obvious tracks, and the dog wasn't helping, so the cynologist was dismissed, while operatives started to rummage throughout the nearest parts of the forest with flashlights, just to clear the conscience, but to no avail. In the morning, they have called the man whose child had gone missing, but he had reported that his wife had not become better, and that he was taking her to the hospital. She was sent to the loony bin for some time, but even after getting released, she couldn't tell anything new, as if she had lost her memory. There was only one connection left: the men's friends. But not to turn all this info into one of the boring episodes of Criminal Russia. Translator note: a once popular TV show documenting all kinds of juicy crimes. In brief, it did not lead anywhere. And look for yourself. The businessman was small time, to put it mildly, and the men followed his disappearance. And what was so strange and scary about this story, might you think? The fact that in a month's time, the same house had a similar case. 2 brothers. The elder brother was 10, the younger, 7. Played behind the house, rummaged under the windows, hoping to find something interesting. The elder brother, naturally, was tasked by the parents to keep an eye on the junior. The rest is taken from the elder brother's testimony, after his father had taken him to the militshiva. It was a short while before 10 p.m., time to return home, when the older brother had suddenly noticed that the younger brother was standing still and staring into a dark alcove under the first floor balcony. You can see such alcoves on the photo here. Perhaps it's even one of them. The older brother tried calling the kid several times, but he did not react. Setting on his way to him, he froze in place when fur-covered paws appeared out of the alcove and dragged the child inside. And the kid did not make a single sound. How he managed to spot the fur on the paws in the dark is an interesting question, as there was no street lamps there. At first, the guy stood dead still and peered into darkness. For a moment, he even thought he had seen big white eyes. Something like that he certainly would never be able to see. And then dashed off as fast as he could back home to his father, who was sipping beer after a long day's work. And he, having smacked the lad for lying, went looking for the younger son with a flashlight. He had examined every alcove, but did not find anything at all, except a hole punched in the corner of one of them, which probably led to the basement of the house. But that hole was too narrow for an adult male. Only a child could get through. But the father wasn't intent to give up so easily. He took a crowbar and busted the lock on the basement door and climbed down there. Unfortunately, having gone through the entire basement, he had found nothing. There was a strong stink of rot that was verified by my grandfather, who examined the cellar later, and something else in the air, a strange, almost heavy smell, although grandfather could smell nothing of that kind. In the end, nothing was found. And that's all, folks. Funny thing is, I knew that boy from my childhood. We were in the same crowd. He was slightly older than me, and the story he told to the militshiva is nearly a perfect fit for what he told us after those events. He was never a particularly merry fellow and soul of the company, but after those events he barely went out, became somewhat fearful and almost panicked when faced with the backside of his own house, flat out refusing to go there. So, on one hand, I personally believe it, but on the other, who knows what a story a child can concoct. But there is the matter of the woman's account, who again was in a state of shock and thus made a shitty witness, and of a guard dog, who would put its tail between its legs like a little puppy, which is slightly atypical. The animal version is doubtful, I'd say. Firstly, what kind of animal likes to snatch up kids without leaving any tracks? Seriously, 2 similar cases in the same place, and in a whole month, nobody saw anything? And secondly, if we take into account the hole leading to the cellar, no large animal would fit into it. There are, of course, the man's friends from the first scene, but as I said, there's just no sense in it for them. Since the second man in had nothing to do with neither with commerce nor with crime, and it would make more sense to steal both children, I reckon. So truth be told, I have no ideas what to think about this one. Unfortunately, that's all there is. The Anon with the investigative grandfather was never heard from again.